Hi, welcome to this channel on magnetic energy technology principles applications. This video is about the Philadelphia experiment. Yeah, I know, it didn't really take place, and until our holy government and our sacred corporatocracy declare it true, it'll stay in the realm of the lunatics and the conspiracy theorists and all that. This is highly unconventional information, of course. The the experiment, if you haven't read about it, please do a quick Google on it, and you can get kind of caught up on it, and if in case you've never heard of this. But since that time, there have been labs around the world that have tried to duplicate those results and work on very similar technology. And so partly I want to talk about how this model relates to that, and a couple of different ways that this model relates to the technology on that experiment and makes it better. Because in this model, you can use magnetic technology to do what they were attempting to do in the Philadelphia experiment and so much more. And so I really want to touch on some of the things that they did that won't work, and the reasons why they won't work according to this model, and then how you would change that and you would make this work so that you could do whatever it is you want to shield. You want to make a ship visible, or you want to make a ship have anti-gravity, because all this type of technology coming into the future will be used in so many different ways. So the first concept that they ran into, so the brick wall that they ran into, and that so many labs around the world, even up until now, are running into, is this electron field distortion principle. And so when you use coils and you are generating a field around those coils with some form of electricity, the more power that you put in that, and you could say the more current or the more amps or whatever it is, but the more power that you pump into those coils, the more difficult it becomes to establish a coherent field. So for example, like a toroidal field. And so in this model, there's really good reasons for why that is. Now, even if you could establish a toroidal field around an electrical generator or a series of coils that you're using to create an amplified field effect around you, if you achieved a toroidal field around that, even momentarily, you would either blow the system up, short out the coils, or cause a whole host of problems, because as soon as that toroidal field got established around those coils and it became coherent and started pulsing naturally, it would start tapping in etheric energy in this model. And those types of electrical systems are not calibrated. They are not built to withstand that additional amount of energy. So it wouldn't even work. Now, but see, there's other things that happen though. When you have a highly polarized field, and so your electron is your primary method of creating like frequencies and fields that are basically forming around those coils, and you're trying to engulf, like let's say you're engulfing a ship in that energy. So many problems happen as you get that ramped up and you get a high amount of power in there. You have the field, it will collapse and it will expand all over the place, because the electrons, they are not happy in that environment. They are too polarized, and they tend to be attracted to things in their environment, anything that can grab onto them. And not only that, they want to go back to the generator. They want to recycle. They want to do all these things that, so for example, neutrons don't do. So the electrons, they will warp the fields. They will become like attached, if you will, magnetically, or if you could say it like polarizing, attached to objects. They will become very warped and distorted, and then they'll start to grab onto like metals around them, and so you create this whole real problem where you don't have a coherent field of electrons around you. You have a very messed up system of warping and distorted fields. Now, the biggest problem in this model is you can't create interdimensional pulsing with electrons. You just can't do it. They won't cooperate. And there's a lot of reasons for that, because they're not a complete system in this model. They're not a complete system of intertwining vortices. And so it's really important to understand that you cannot create an interdimensional pulsing field of electrons. Now, why is that important? Because if you move into In this model, what would be the substitute for that? It would be pulse induction symmetry. So pulse induction symmetry is you're moving from, and I'm going to say this in conventional terminology, but even though we don't agree with those terms anyway, but you're moving from electrons to neutrons. And so now when you have neutrons are your predominant source, and so you have the flow of neutrons and you have the expression of neutrons in the field. Now you can create very stable pulsing toroidal fields of neutrons that will tap the etheric at certain frequencies, at certain pulse rates, or a certain magnetic resonance. They will tap additional energy from the etheric magnetic field, and that's fine. They love to do that. But not only that, though, when we hit a certain resonance and a pulse rate with those neutrons, we can do what looks like we're blinking them in and out of existence, and that allows them to go through anything in their path and not be affected by it. And that's what we want. We want the toroidal field to expand, to grow bigger around those generating coils, and we want it to encompass whatever it is, whatever vehicle or ship it is. And so it's a very powerful switch when you go to pulse induction symmetry. Now here's the other thing about that. You don't have to have a tremendous amount of current being generated because you are inducing an etheric magnetic flow into those coils. So we are seeding the coils with what looks to be like a very low amount of current or a low amount of power. And it's like, whoa, well, how is that? So that's such small amount of power being pumped into those coils. How is that generating such a massive toroidal field that is changing the existence of everything inside of it? Well, because we are inducing an etheric magnetic response. We are creating that draw factor. We are creating that vortice that pulls in more and more energy that's attracted into that relatively neutral field. And so you would say, wow, this is the expression of neutrons through matter, and that becomes a very stable, reliable means for expressing energy around those coils. Now, the next thing they ran into was they really hit this like wave propagation interference problem. And that was a huge problem. So imagine now you have, like, on one side of a ship, you have your generating coils. On the other side of the ship, you have your other generating coils. And basically what you're wanting to do is encapsulate the entire ship in those energy fields and then create your effect. Now this will be done in the future, but it will be done with the magnetic technology instead of the electrical technology. So one of the things you run into right out the gate is you get wave canceling, you get wave interference, you get wave multiplying or amplifying. So the ideal frequencies and resonant points that you're looking for, that you need to create the effect you're creating, are already being distorted and thrown off by the two different systems competing with each other. Because those waves are they're going to interfere with each other, they're going to compete with each other, so they're going to cancel each other out, they're going to amplify each other. So you're already throwing off the resonance of the whole system, which is a huge problem, especially when you get into the material science and the material interaction with frequencies and electronically generated frequencies. The materials that are processed, that are part of that, are huge. So any types of conductors or metals or anything change those frequencies, and then so you have frequencies being altered over here, you have frequencies being altered over here, and then you have those frequencies hitting each other, and there's all kinds of interactions that are taking place at those wavefronts with those electron-based frequencies. So in the magnetic model, what you do is you move into magnetic field entrainment. Now this is completely different, so that if you have a magnetic generator here and a magnetic generator here, and you have those toroidal fields building around those units, what happens is, because they're both pulsing simultaneously and they are neutron-based, they're neutral energy-based, they complement each other. So when they hit each other, they combine. So they combine in sacred, if you want to call it this, but sacred geometrical patterns. So they complement each other. So they might either form, depending on how you position those generators, they could form one massive toroidal field over the entire vessel, which is what they will do. But then the inside of that, there'll be pockets. So there might be like 3 or 5 or 6 or 9 pockets, and that may depend on the number of generators that you have, but they all work together in synchronicity to form a much larger toroidal field over that, and they don't compete with each other. And the materials that are the conductive materials that are part of that ship, they don't interfere with those neutrons because we have them pulsing essentially interdimensionally, in and out, in and out. So you think, wow, you're destroying neutrons or you're losing them. We're not losing them, and they're not being destroyed. They're being transformed. It is the etheric magnetic flow coming into the units that allows us to let them be expendable, if you want to call them that. But we're not really destroying anything. We're letting them flow through their system, and that creates the coherent toroidal fields that are necessary for when we hit certain pulse rates to diffract and reflect light, to create anti-gravity effects and everything. So that way that like magnetic field entrainment is a huge part of when you're using multiple units and how they work synchronistically together. Now the next thing they ran into, which is a huge problem in labs, and it's this whole dielectric field inhibitors. So you got to imagine, like, if you're taking a conventional generator and you have all these coils and you have Tesla coils and you're creating these fields and you're trying to make an effect with these fields, not only do the parts of the actual coil assembly, but anything in that environment that is like a dielectric, and it causes problems with the field integrity and the field coherence. And basically, the more power that you add, the more this becomes problematic. So it's kind of like if you want like a normal ship that has plastics involved, or even like humans or other types of elements that can serve as dielectrics, and they're very natural dielectrics, which like mica is an awesome thing for magnetics, but it's also an incredible dielectric. But they create all these problems in the propagation field. And especially when you have multiple fields trying to combine, dielectrics play a huge problem when you're dealing with electrons. But when you move into the magnetic world, you have neutral field pulse enhancers. Neutral field pulse enhancers. So if you have multiple units on like a ship, say for example, and they're creating pulsing toroidal fields that love each other and they combine and everything, the things that would be dielectrics in that environment have no impact whatsoever on this. But if you have like naturally occurring dielectrics like mica, for example, not only does it not inhibit the magnetic pulsing and the magnetic fields that are creating, it actually enhances their performance. And that's really huge. So like you can use dielectric materials to stabilize and really enhance the toroidal fields created by the magnetic coils and the magnetic units, if that makes sense. And that's so neutral field pulse enhancers are a big deal. I mean, that's a way to have a ship that has everything in it attributes and contributes to creating the toroidal field, the pulsing fields around those vehicles. Now, the next thing that they ran into, which is a huge problem in this model, is the frequency-induced systemic field distortions. And that's a big mouthful, but it's frequency-induced systemic field distortions. And what that's talking about is when you expose like anything can be called a system. So a system could be like the ship itself, like the metallic materials of it. It could be the human beings on the ship. It could be any type of food on the ship. But in this model, a system, a coherent system would be something that has etheric magnetic energy of a particular resonant signature flowing through it. And that creates a stabilized system that we would consider like an object or something in matter, or like a physical living being of some sort. Could be a plant, it could be an animal, it could be a human, it could be whatever it is. But the problem is when you get a certain level of electron power, or you could say like a certain level of power or current flowing through coils, you get like systemic field distortions. So you can't expose any type of system, including like a human being or like the hull of a ship, you can't expose that to fields that are too strong, that are electron based, because it will create distortions in those systemic systems. It'll create systemic distortions in those energy systems. And so that's why you can get like as things start blinking out of our existence because they're being overpowered by a pulsating or resonating electron field, anything like within the body and the whole will start to become distorted and they can overlap into each other. And why is that? It's because you're flooding them with a polarized energy that is electron based, and that totally distorts our system, especially at higher levels of power. So the answer to that from a magnetic point of view is you have magnetically induced system integrity. So magnetically induced system integrity is this idea that when you have magnetic generators and you have magnetic fields creating that are neutrally based, everything within those everything within those pulsing fields is enhanced. So the systemic performance inside of those toroidal fields is enhanced, and it's kept like you keep the autonomy of it. So it keeps its integrity, which is why you call it magnetically induced system integrity. Because you can have, for example, then humans and like a ship blinking out of existence, but when they're on that off pulse and they are almost like, you could say they're like intradimensional, we would say they're at a higher resonance or whatever it is, but they still have integrity even at those different resonant points. So let's say they go into another dimension, or they go into time travel, or they're exploring higher dimensions, or whatever it is, the ship still feels like a ship to the people. Everything is maintaining its integrity because you are dealing more with neutral energy. If you want to call it neutrons, that's fine. But you're dealing more with a neutrally based energy that can feed into all of the systems and enhance their integrity and enhance their performance and actually make them even stronger, if that makes sense. So your integrity gets even stronger. And so that you can kind of see how if you have magnetic generators and you have coils that are generating pulsing neutral magnetic fields, how that type of experiment, like the Philadelphia experiment, and it will be back online in this near future where it'll be across the board. You can do things to conventional materials and conventional ships with magnetic generators and change the nature of them and make them like cloaking or make them have anti-gravity or whatever you're going to do. But it's so critical that you follow these principles so that you keep the integrity of everyone on the ship distinct and like keep them like separate so they don't combine with each other, they don't interfere with each other. You don't come back from the journey with guys that are half stuck out of the hull of the ship and all these crazy things. So that's a lot. I know I just covered a lot of weird concepts and principles. So please, if you have any questions, please send in questions. And and as always, I thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.